Отже, до слова запрошується Тед Треллер. Тед буде доповідати англійською мовою. Ми зачекаємо, поки перекладач розпочне переклад. Я вже вас запрошую вдягати наушники, кому потрібно. Тед має феноменальний 30-річний досвід в тематиці, яку ми сьогодні обговорюємо. Він працював в різних частинах світу. Це і Північна Америка, і Росія, і Китай, і Південно-Східна Азія. Відповідно, я думаю, що презентація Теда буде для нас всіх цікавою та корисною. Ted, I have introduced you shortly. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Okay. It's my intention today to provide you with a very brief introduction to industrial park development in Canada. I plan to do this by providing a focus to some of the lessons we've learned in our efforts to introduce industrial parks, and then to look at a particular example, and that example being in the city of Edmonton, province of Alberta in Canada, their efforts to introduce an energy and technology park. I've chosen the city of Edmonton not because I live there. I've chosen the city of Edmonton because it's a sister city to the city of Lviv. Secondly, I know a little bit more about that than I do what's happening in your country. But also, as well, I feel that whenever we're talking about industrial parks, we're talking about something that has global implications. We're talking about markets that aren't just domestic markets. And so perhaps some of the lessons we've learned in Canada and that are being applied in Edmonton would have some relevance to your situation. I should also say up front, I do like industrial parks, but I prefer it when they're well done. The introduction of industrial parks began in Canada in the mid-1940s. These development modalities grew out of the post-war industrialization boom. In economic development language, we called this time the time of smokestack chasing. It's a time when every municipality wanted a smokestack and every municipality wanted an industrial park to put it in. We've matured a little bit since then, but not completely. Today, it's fairly typical for most communities in Canada to have one and usually several industrial parks. In terms of organization, you'll find both privately and publicly owned parks, as well as a combination of both. It's also quite common to have shared multi-jurisdictional parks, where several communities share an industrial park or an industrial corridor together. Properly structured, make sure I'm on the right slide, sorry. Properly structured industrial park development provides benefits. These benefits can accrue in an array of physical, financial, social, environmental, and economic returns. That benefit in varying amounts, the relative stakeholders being the developer, the investor, and the municipality. We all know this. But the corollary of this is that for each stakeholder, unless there are measurable benefits that result in a manner and in an impact that's consistent with what their needs are, the development either won't proceed or will not succeed. If we ignore for a moment the artificial distortion of land value that might arise as a result of rezoning or designating an area an industrial park, the very act of designating an area an industrial park, a science park, an eco park, does not in itself create any value to the community, to the investor, or the developer. It's a myth to believe that industrial parks automatically generate benefits. In the interest of time, and I know I only have, 6.5 minutes left, in the interest of time, allow me to reiterate some of the other so-called development myths pertaining to industrial parks. Now, I know many of you will think you're quite familiar with these. They're not very complicated. They're pretty simple. So if we're all that smart and all that intelligent when it comes to developing industrial parks, why do these simple mistakes that I'm going to talk about keep reappearing? And they do. There's more than enough half-filled industrial parks in my country or industrial parks that have not succeeded. So let's look at them. It's a myth to assume that if you build it, they will come. Really? Who will come? Why will they come? I find it amazing that we still occasionally forget that success depends on demand driving supply, not vice versa. It's a myth to believe that because an industrial park works in one community, it'll work in your community. There's no McDonald's franchise when it comes to industrial parks. Just ask the people that have tried to replicate Silicon Valley in other areas. It's a myth to believe that industrial parks are or should be separate from the municipality's local economic development plan or effort. Properly designed and operated, industrial parks can contribute to and appropriately support economic development efforts. But they're just one tool in that toolbox. Just because you have a hammer doesn't mean that every problem needs a nail. Alternatively, parks designed and developed in isolation of the municipality's economic realities and interests invite at worst difficulty and at most failure. It's a myth to believe that industrial parks are best done by the private sector or best done by the public sector. In Canada, there are both successful parks, either privately driven or publicly driven or a combination of both. That's best decided taking into consideration the relative mandates, the relative interests, the capacities, and the capabilities of either proponent to manage, market, service, and position the park for success. Let's look at the Edmonton Energy and Technology Park. By way of background, the city of Edmonton has a population of roughly 1 million citizens. It's situated 300 kilometers away from the world's third largest oil reserves. In addition to being the hub of these oil reserves, the city boasts 2 of the world's largest petrochemical plants and 17 energy-related research and innovation centers. There's 4 industrial districts within the city, comprising approximately 60 separate and dispersed industrial, business, and research parks, ranging in size from as small as 5 to 10 hectares on up to 5,000 hectares. Edmonton is an economy on fire. Also, despite the fact that the Edmonton economy is on fire, what I like about Edmonton is they've taken the time to go back to basics in designing their industrial park. Given what we just talked about, what might we say about Edmonton's efforts to develop an energy and technology park? First off, this park was designed to capitalize on the city's competitiveness and its comparative advantage. Its design is consistent with the city's economic realities. This park is premised on a rigorous and objective feasibility study and business case based on the realities of the location and contrasted with the unique needs of the target market and its proposed customers. This park has a very comprehensive implementation plan. It articulates specific marketing approaches and actions to build success. It proposes not to be all things to all people. Rather, its recruitment strategies are focused on clusters of companies that have a common sectoral orientation and by definition will logically benefit by co-location. This park is structured to complement and build from Edmonton's long-term economic development plan, and this park includes a balance of private-public sector participation in both the responsibilities and obligations of development as well as its benefits. Being the economist in me, I have a couple little concerns with this park. Despite those things, which I think are more than significant, this park, in my mind, has 2 notable concerns. First off, it has an emphasis on industries in high technology or technology-driven industries. This park, based on its size, will need to be relevant for at least 20 to 25 years. With changing technologies, what happens to that park? Secondly, We all know the story about primary products, and oil and gas being a classic example of the cycles oil and gas goes through. What happens 20 to 25 years down the road, or 5 years down the road, when those cycles start taking a drop again? I don't know enough about the park to say that they haven't considered this, but what I'm saying is the information I've read would suggest that that's one of the things that they maybe haven't clearly articulated in their plan. Nonetheless, what does all this mean? What I set out to do was to share with you how our experience in Canada highlights certain critical preconditions to success. These are valuable insights into how we should position our efforts with respect to industrial park development. And in the case of Edmonton, many of these lessons are fully entrenched. For example, the importance of ensuring the project is structured on their unique economic realities, the importance of integrating demand-based priorities, the importance of balancing participation and benefits amongst all the partners. I also wanted to point out by expressing my concerns that we aren't always as diligent as we should be, and on occasion we tend to overlook or ignore certain basic understandings. For example, that industrial parks in Canada have been known to lose their relevance over time. Of course, lessons learned in and of themselves are not the panaceas to successful park development, but they are useful considerations, and I hope some of this discussion is of value to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.